So we're doing peripheral nervous system. And what the peripheral nervous system is it's going to be all of the nervous tissue that lies outside of the central nervous system. Once again, your central nervous system will be your brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, like I said, all tissue, all neural tissue lying outside of that. So that'll be the nerves that are exiting the brain stem, and so that'll be your cranial nerves leaving the brain and brain stem, and that will be your spinal nerves. These are here to be sensory receptors, peripheral nerve endings, and motor endings. So sensory receptors and peripheral nerve endings will be ways of taking in information, and motor endings will be the way the body's going to tell some sort of tissue to do its action, whether it's a gland or some sort of muscle. With your sensory receptors, they're going to be specialized so they can respond to changes in their environment, and the types of changes that they will respond to will be different. All right. Activation of them can be graded potentials, so that means that they can build up to have their action potential, or they can have increase or decrease sensation. With the awareness of a stimulus and perception, basically is all your receptors do is they just realize is they'll say, oh, I feel some sort of pressure, I feel mechanical deformation, or I feel some sort of chemical change. When you eat food, all that's happening is you have receptors in your mouth sensing chemical change. The reason why you perceive that is a taste is your brain takes in those chemical reactions that are happening in your mouth, and it perceives it as, oh, this tastes like chocolate, or oh, this tastes like peanut butter, whatever you're eating. So the sensation occurs at the nerve, and the perception of that sensation is going to occur in the brain. And then your receptors are going to be able to be classified based on the type of stimulus, the location of the stimulus, and their structural complexity. So when we're classifying by stimulus type, you can have mechanoreceptors, thermoreceptors, photoreceptors, chemoreceptors, or nociceptors. Mechanoreceptors will sense mechanical change, so touch, stretch, vibration, stuff like that. Thermo is in thermometer. These guys are going to be sensitive to temperature change. Photo, these will be light change. Chemoreceptors will be chemical changes, so these will be real important for our blood chemistry and your sense of smell and taste. And the last one is nociceptors. These ones will sense damage, and if damage is occurring, your body perceives that as pain. So these guys can respond to extreme heat or cold or pressure or inflammation type stuff. Okay, next one we classify by location. You can have exteroceptors, interoceptors, or proprioceptors. Exteroceptors are going to be external. They're going to be outside of the body. Those will be on like your skin. Interoceptors will be internal. They will be within the body, and they'll be mostly on blood vessels and viscera, so viscera such as organs. And then proprioceptors. Proprioceptors are going to be how your body knows where it is in space. It's going to give you awareness of where you are. So these will be in skeletal muscles, tendons, joints, and ligaments. And like I said, this lets you know your movements. It lets you know where you are in space. You can close your eyes and put your right hand behind your head and know is it close to your head or far from your head without looking. Now structural complexity. They can be complex or simple. Complex ones are going to be our special senses. We go over this in chapter 15. Our simple receptors are going to be for our general senses. Touch, pressure, stretch, or vibration. Okay, you're going to get pain and temperature and muscle sense. Within these, there's going to be three types of classifications. There will be unencapsulated, which means you just have free nerve endings. There will be modified free nerve endings, and then there will be encapsulated. This will have like a little capsule at the end of the nerve. With our unencapsulated or free nerve endings or dendritic endings, these are usually going to be thermoreceptors or nociceptors. Okay. With the nociceptors, once again, like I said, these guys check for tissue damage, and you perceive that as pain because if you're damaging tissue, your body wants you to stop it, so you stop the damage of the tissue. With your modified unencapsulated, these guys are going to be there for light touch. When I think of these, I think of hair follicles is the first one I'm thinking of. Okay, so with our unencapsulateds, all right, here's a free nerve ending. Here's our modified free nerve ending. It's kind of funky looking. Okay, and then we have our follicle with our nerve ending surrounding it. These guys are both going to be mechanoreceptors, and they're both going to be exteroreceptors. All right, this one can be extero, interno, or proprioceptor. So with our mechanoreceptors, we're going to have some different types. You're going to have something called a Meissner's corpuscle. This will do discriminative touch. So if you were to hold something in your hand, you could tell me if it was like a key or a pen or something like that. There's Paxinian corpuscles. These guys will be deep touch or vibration. So if somebody touches you on the skin and they have a good amount of pressure, these will be responsible for that. Ruffini's, these are more endings than corpuscles. These will be a deep continuous pressure. So if somebody's poking at you and they're holding their finger, they're not pulling it away. Muscle spindles will tell you the amount of stretch or tension in a muscle. Golgi tendon organs will do the same thing, except it'll be in the tendons. And then joint kinesthetic receptors. These guys are going to be in your joint capsule, so you'll know how much motion is going on in a joint. You can know, is your arm bent 90 degrees, or is it bent 45 degrees, or is it at 180 degrees? So, okay, so here's an example of a Meissner's corpuscle. Good spot to find these are going to be in the dermal papilla, fingertips. These will be very, very light touch. Paxinian corpuscles. These guys you'll find in dermis and hypodermis. You could find them in joints and ligaments and in your external genitalia. And then our Ruffini endings. These guys will be deep within the dermis or within a joint capsule. Okay, so from sensation to perception, your survival depends on your sensation and perception. So your body perceives damage as pain. The reason why it perceives damage as pain is because if you are damaging your tissues and you allow it to keep occurring, then it can kill you, basically. So your sensation is awareness of changes in the internal and external environment. The perception is a conscious interpretation of those stimuli. Okay, so if it's getting a little warmer or cooler outside, your body's just going to notice change in temperature. If you feel cold, then that's your body perceiving that. That's your perception of it being cold outside. This will be the conscious interpretation of those stimuli. Okay, it can happen at the receptor level, at the circuit level, or at the perceptual level. So receptor level would mean that it's occurring right where the touch or the sensation is occurring. So like if I touch the table, it's in my hand, it's going to be happening right in my fingertip. For the circuit level, that will be the ascending pathway. So that would be my tract carrying the information to my brain. And perceptual level is it gets all the way up to the brain. Okay, next one's going to be adaptations and sensitivity in the presence of a constant stimulus. So you ever, right now if you're wearing a pair of shorts or pants, did you feel them on you that you were wearing them before I just mentioned it? Probably not, because what happens is the longer you have a constant type of perception, just as long as it's not dangerous, your body starts to ignore it. So receptor membranes will become less responsive and the potentials will decline in frequency until they basically stop. Okay, so structure of a nerve is going to be similar to kind of like how we had with our muscles. So we'll have our endoneurium wrapped around individual axons. Okay, next we'll have perineurium, which is these guys. A perineurium will be wrapped around a bunch of axons. And then we'll have our epineurium, which will be wrapped around a bunch of bundles. Okay, it'll be a tough, fibrous, protective outer coat. Okay, so once again with our classification of nerves, it's always going to be the same. Sensory afferent, motor efferent. They can be somatic or visceral, so is it going to be muscular or organs? And then do they arise from your brain or from the spinal cord? Okay, so first one, we're going to have these ganglia. All right, we talked about them in chapter 12. We'll talk about them in 14 also. With your ganglia, there's dorsal root ganglia. All right, these are going to be sensory and somatic. And then we're going to have autonomic ganglia, which will be motor and visceral. With nerves, we talked about how adult nerves are going to be amitotic, and we also talked about how peripheral nerves are capable of regenerating, while central nerves are not capable of regenerating. We're going to actually go into the true reason of why they're not just because of the axon sheath. It's going to be because oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system, those will produce this growth inhibiting protein if damage occurs. In order for nerve regeneration to occur, first you're going to need macrophage to clean up the damaged area. Then you get Schwann cells that are going to create a tube for the new nerve to follow, and then your axons will regenerate through that damaged portion. Okay, so right here you get the axon gets damaged. So what's going to happen? We'll have macrophage. So here's our damage; it broke. We have macrophage come in and clean up the area and get rid of all the dead, broken down, injured debris. And then we get our Schwann cells forming a new tube, and then the axons can start to heal up. Okay, so we're moving on to our cranial nerves. There's 12 pairs of nerves associated with the brain. Most are mixed function, which means that they can be motor or sensory. Okay, and each nerve is going to be identified by a number. There's 12 of them, so there's pair 1 through 12. The way I remember it is on old Olympus towering tops, a Finn and German viewed some hops. All right, S is going to be your spinal accessory nerve. So S and A could be the same thing. This is the accessory nerve. Some people call it the spinal accessory nerve. So let's go through the names. First cranial nerve is your olfactory nerve. All right, I'm going to want you to know this chart. So first nerve is olfactory. Its sensory function is smell. It doesn't have a motor function. It doesn't have a parasympathetic. Oops. Next one is your optic. It's going to do vision, no motor, no parasympathetic. Next one is your oculomotor. It does not have a sensory function. It only has motor functions, and it has parasympathetic fibers. Next one is your trochlear. No sensory function. It has a motor function, and it has no parasympathetic. Next one is going to be the trigeminal, which will be sensory. It'll have motor function and no parasympathetics. Next we go to 6, which will be abducens. It will not have sensory function, and it'll only have motor function. Now we're going to get into cranial nerve 7 through 12. So 7 is facial. It will have taste, motor, and parasympathetic function. Vestibulocochlear nerve is going to have hearing and balance, some motor, no parasympathetic function. Glossopharyngeal is going to have sensory function, motor function, and parasympathetic. Vagus is going to be across the board again. And then with your accessory, aka spinal accessory nerve, and the hypoglossal nerve, those will both only have motor function. So looking here, here's going to be your olfactory nerve. And this is the bulb and the tract of the olfactory nerve. Next is going to be your optic nerve with the optic chiasm. We'll talk about this in the special senses chapter. Here's your oculomotor nerve, your trochlear nerve, trigeminal nerve, abducens nerve. These first chunks right here are here it works better here, you can see it pointing to it. Here's your facial nerve, the vestibulocochlear nerve, glossopharyngeal, vagus nerve, This is your spinal accessory, sorry, this is your hypoglossal nerve, and here's your accessory nerve. If you notice, the way they're numbered, 1 through 12, you just travel down the picture, and it basically just goes 1 through 12. So for the olfactory nerves, these guys are going to arise from the olfactory bulb. We'll have little nerve hairs passing through the cribriform plate, and these guys are going to be chemoreceptors, and your perception of this will be your sense of smell. Next one is going to be our optic nerves. All right, these guys are going to arise from the retinas. They're going to pass through canals, and if you notice, check this out. This is the right side of my brain, left side of my brain. The right side of my brain is going to have one set of nerves going to my right eye, one set of nerves going to my left eye. Left side of my brain has one set of nerves going to my left eye, one set of nerves going to my right eye. Can you see that color there? The reason why that's happening is your eyes are actually yolked together and your visual fields are overlapped. So if you close one eye and then open it and close the other and switch back and forth, closing one eye at a time, you're going to notice your two fields converge and are one. So both sides of your brain are controlling each eye. We'll talk more about that in the next chapter. Next three, okay, so you're going to have your oculomotor nerves. These guys are going to function in raising the eyelid, direction of moving the eyeball, constricting the iris, which will be parasympathetic function, and it will control the shape of your lens. Next, you have your trochlear nerve. I remember is SO4-LR6. Your superior oblique muscle for your eye is cranial nerve 4, called the trochlear nerve. Your lateral rectus is cranial nerve 6. And if you think the name of cranial nerve 6 is abducens, is an abduction, it will abduct your eye. Trochlear nerve, this one's going to be a primary motor nerve, and it's going to be for your superior oblique muscle. Next one, trigeminal nerve. There's three branches, so there's V1, V2, and V3. V1 goes through your superior orbital fissure, V2 goes through the foramen rotundum, and V3 goes through foramen ovale. Alright, this gives you a nice distribution of the sensory for your V1, V2, V3. Alright, and then V3 is going to really help out with chewing. V2 will have some motor functions. Alright, and V1 will also help out with some motor functions. Next one is your zygomatic. Sorry, the zygomatic is your facial nerve. The facial nerve is going to have 5 major branches. I remember it as the, look at this hand on this little boy's face. You get temporal, zygomatic, buccal, mandibular, and cervical branches. I remember it as the zebra bit my cheek. The zebra bit my cheek. So with its motor functions, it will help out with facial expression and parasympathetic impulses for your salivary glands and lacrimal glands. And for the sensory function, it will do taste to the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Next ones are vestibulocochlear. So vestibular is in balance, cochlear is in cochlea. So this is the vestibule, this is there for balance. This is your cochlea, this is going to be there for hearing. So here's an ear, here's your auditory tube. Alright, vestibule is there for balance, cochlea is there for hearing. Next one is glossal pharyngeal. So glossal, alright, pharyngeal, pharynx, tongue. So this is going to help with taste, and this is going to help out with swallowing, and it's going to help out a little bit with taste. Okay, the big sensory functions it's going to have are going to be, it's going to be checking out our carotid chemoreceptors and our baroreceptors. Okay, vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10. This is going to be carrying information to basically all of your organs throughout the body. Okay, so it's going to be mostly motor fibers that are parasympathetic in nature. They're going to help regulate the heart, the lungs, your digestive viscera, and they're going to they're going to be making sure that everything's working in proper proportion, or however it should be working at that moment in time. The sensory impulses are going to be carrying information from your abdomen, the baroreceptors, taste buds, and posterior tongue in the pharynx. Okay, next one is your spinal accessory nerve, or the accessory nerves. These guys come from C1 to C5. They are rootless, and they will pass through each foramen. They will each pass through the foramen magnum. Okay. Then finally, we have our hypoglossal nerves. So the hypoglossal nerves are going to exit the medulla via the hypoglossal canal, and they're going to be there to help out with speech and swallowing. Okay, with our spinal nerves, there will be 8 cervical nerves, C1 through C8, 12 thoracic nerves, which will be T1 through T12, 5 lumbar nerves, which will be L1 through L5, 5 sacral nerves, which are S1 through S5, and 1 coccygeal nerve. It can be C1 or CO. With your spinal nerve roots, there's going to be 2 parts. There's going to be ventral efferent and dorsal afferent. I remember this as Dave. My dad's name is Dave. So dorsal afferent, ventral efferent. Ventral are going to be efferent fibers, and those will be the motor horn. Dorsal horn will be afferent fibers, and those will be sensory. If you remember, it's always the same. Sensory afferent, motor efferent. Dave is always the same. So you get your sensory afferent, motor efferent, and Dave is dorsal afferent, ventral efferent. Your dorsal and ventral roots will penetrate the spine, and they will come together to form a single root. Alright, so here's going to be a ventral root, here's a dorsal root. Those guys will come together to form a single nerve. So we'll have a dorsal ramus, we'll have a ventral ramus. Okay, you get a rami communicantes, which means that these rami can talk to one another. With your spinal nerves, alright, each spinal nerve is going to have mixed rami. So we'll have a dorsal ramus, a large ventral ramus, a meningeal branch, and a rami communicantes. So we said Dave is the same, right? So dorsal afferent, so dorsal is going to be sensory, your ventral is going to be motor. The meningeal branch lets it see the meninges around it, dura mater, pia mater, all that stuff, your meninges. And then the rami communicantes are going to allow the ventral rami to communicate with each other. All ventral rami except T2 through 12 form an interlacing nerve network called a plexus. Okay, so we're going to go through the different plexi, the cervical, brachial, lumbar, and sacral plexuses. So first one here is going to be your cervical plexus. Big thing I'm going to want you to be able to pull off of this picture is going to be the root numbers and your accessory nerve, which is here, and your phrenic nerve. Cervical plexus will be C1 through C4, and phrenic nerve is C3, 4, 5. I remember C3, 4, 5 keeps the diaphragm alive. So your phrenic nerve innervates your diaphragm, which you need to breathe. Next one is going to be your brachial plexus. It's going to be C5 through T1. Here's your brachial plexus here. It's going to be divided into roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and then the major peripheral nerves. I want you to know these divisions, and I want you to know what the major peripheral nerves are. The easiest way I figured out how to learn this was to just draw it a couple times. Here's an example of how the brachial plexus actually looks within you. Okay, so here's going to be your axillary nerve, the musculocutaneous nerve, the radial nerve, median nerve, and the ulnar nerves. Okay. I also remember roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and major branches is rugby, team, drinks, cold, beer. Roots are rugby, trunks are team, division is drinks, cords are cold, branches are beer. So rugby, team, drinks, cold, beer. Okay, so the branches of our brachial plexus. First one is going to be your axillary nerve. It's going to do the deltoid, the teres minor, and the skin and the joint around the shoulder. Next one is going to be your musculocutaneous nerve. Musculocutaneous nerve is going to do the biceps brachii and the brachioradialis and the skin of the lateral forearm. Median nerve is going to do your flexors and the pronators in the forearm, and some of the intrinsic muscles in the hand. Your ulnar nerve is going to do your flexor carpi ulnaris and part of the flexor digitorum profundus. It's also going to help out with medial, with intrinsic muscles of the hand. And then finally, your radial nerve is going to do basically all your extensors and supinating muscles. So it'll be like the back of the arm. Okay, next is your lumbar plexus. So these guys are going to do your thigh, abdominal wall, and your hip flexors. You're going to have your femoral nerve and your obturator nerve. So with your femoral nerve, this is going to do your quadriceps and the anterior thigh. Oops. With the obturator nerve, this guy is going to do your adductor muscles. So I want you to know the name of the nerve, its spinal root levels, and the gist of what it does. So femorals, L2 through 4, obturators, L2 through 4, lateral femoral cutaneous is going to be L2 and L3, iliohypogastrics, L1, ilioinguinal is L1, genitofemoral is L2. The name of these are going to tell you either where they're passing or what they do. So femoral is going to be doing your thigh. Obturator is going to be passing through the obturator foramen and it's going to be doing your obturator muscles. Lateral femoral cutaneous does the lateral thigh. Iliohypogastric is going to do the iliohypogastric region, so the area of your ilium and your hypogastric, so below the stomach. Ilioinguinal does like the inguinal canal, and genitofemoral will be the genitals and part of the thigh. Okay, here's your lumbar plexus. So here's your iliohypogastric, your ilioinguinal, your lateral femoral cutaneous nerve, your obturator nerve, and the lumbosacral trunk. And here it is, everything observed again on this slide. Okay, next one is your sacral plexus. It's going to be L4 through S4. And coming off of this is going to be the sciatic nerve. It's going to be the largest, longest, thickest nerve in the body. It's going to innervate your hamstrings, your adductors, and most of the muscles in your leg and foot. So here it is right here. It's going to be composed of your common fibular and your tibial nerves. Here's that sciatic nerve. Common fibular and tibial nerves. Comes down, it splits off. Here's the common fibular again, and here's the tibial nerve again. Okay, with the branches of your sacral plexus, the big important one is going to be your sciatic nerve. It's L4, 5, S1 through 3. Okay, and it's going to be made up of the tibial nerve and the common fibular. Next one, superior gluteal nerve, is L4 through S1. Inferior gluteal nerve is going to be L5 through S2. Posterior femoral cutaneous, S1 through S3, and your pudendal. Once again, these are going to name where they're doing. So posterior femoral cutaneous, this will be the back of the thigh and the buttocks for the skin. All right, muscles in the popliteal region. Inferior gluteal, this will be the glute max. Your glute max makes up like the bottom of your butt is going to be a big part of the glute max. Superior gluteal will be your glute medius and glute minimus. These are going to be higher up on the buttocks. Okay, next one we're going to talk about dermatomes here. So with the dermatome, it's going to be an area of skin innervated by a specific spinal region. All spinal nerves except C1 are going to participate in our dermatomes. This is a dermatomal map. So if you see here, like here's C2, 3, 4, 5. Outside of your shoulder is going to be partly C5. All right, we come down some of the forearms, C6. C7 is going to be your first, your pointer and your middle finger. C8 working its way back. Okay, so this is just like showing you what dermatomes are. There are specific areas of skin that are innervated by specific spinal root levels with nerves. So the spinal nerve level and the area of skin are linked one in one. Okay, with innervation, there's something called Hilton's Law. It says any nerve serving a muscle that produces movement at a joint will also innervate the joint and the skin over the joint. That kind of makes sense. So if you injure something, the area in that whole, if you injure a joint, everything in that area is kind of achy, and that's basically what Hilton's Law is pointing at. Motor endings, you're going to have your peripheral nervous system, and that's going to activate effectors by releasing our neurotransmitters. So with our innervation of visceral muscles, if you remember, our smooth muscle, it's going to have its varicosities, and it's going to work with acetylcholine and norepinephrine as secondary messengers. Okay, these are going to have much slower responses than skeletal muscles. And just our innervation of a skeletal muscle, so basically an action potential comes down the nerve. As that hits the terminal, so here's our axon terminal, this is the synapse, alright, neuromuscular junction. So action potential reaches the end of the nerve, calcium gated channels open, calcium floods in, it's going to cause the release of acetylcholine via exocytosis. We'll release acetylcholine, this is the rate limiting step where it diffuses across the synapse to bond with its proteins. When acetylcholine binds, our ion channels open up, sodium flushes in, potassium flushes out. We could get our whole muscle contraction beginning. Okay. After that, we have acetylcholine esterase, which breaks down any remnants of acetylcholine, and we will reabsorb any extra acetylcholine also. Okay, so next one's going to be our levels of motor control. So you can have segmental control, which would be at your spinal cord. That would be just like basically a reflex. So sensory comes in, goes right out as a motor input. Projection level, which would be, it's going up to like your pyramidal, or you're going to have some sort of higher brain function. It'll go to like the brainstem or something like that. And then the highest one will be pre-command. This is actually going to the brain. Alright, so it could go to the cerebellum, you get information, your brain's going to think about and send information all the way back down. Okay, with reflexes, you're going to have two types, inborn and learned. Inborn are going to be rapid, involuntary, predictable reflexes, like when you hit somebody's popliteal tendon, their knee kicks. Alright, that's going to be a good example of an inborn. An acquired is going to be something like driving or hitting a golf ball or riding a bike. So with your reflexes, there's going to be 5 parts to it. There's going to be a receptor. It will respond to a stimulus. Okay, then you're going to have a sensory neuron, which is going to bring that information in to the spinal cord. You're going to have an interneuron that thinks about the information. You get a motor neuron that carries out, that's going to be carrying information out to an effector. Okay, and the effector will do whatever type of action it does. If it's a muscle, it contracts. If it's a gland, it can release its substance or stop releasing its substance. So the receptor will take in the stimulus. Sensory nerve will transmit that information to the cord. Interneuron will basically think about it, and it will send the information to the motor neuron, which carries the information to the effector, and the effector will respond accordingly. With your spinal reflexes, okay, you're going to have somatic reflexes, alright? With your testing your somatic reflexes, your inborn or intrinsic reflexes, these are going to be very important clinically to make sure that your nervous system is working properly, and it's nice actually to do them in a healthy individual to have a baseline, because some people's somatic reflexes are different than others. Next one, we're going to have our stretch and Golgi tendon reflexes. The gist of what these are is this is for skeletal muscle. In order for it to work smoothly, you're going to have your muscle spindles they're going to talk to each other about their length. All right, Golgi tendon organs are going to inform the brain about the amount of tension within the muscle. What it's doing, the gist of it, is it's making sure that you're having a smooth, even contraction of the muscle. How stretch reflexes work is stretch is going to activate the motor spindle. Sensory neurons will synapse directly with motor neurons. The motor neurons cause the stretch muscle to contract. So if you're sitting there on a chair and somebody grabs your arm and quickly pulls it backwards, your response is going to be to pull to stop them from ripping your arm off, basically. That's what this is saying. All of your stretch reflexes are going to be monosynaptic, and there's going to be a reciprocal inhibition that occurs. What does that mean? If I want to contract my biceps, in order to contract my biceps and be very, very strong, I want to inhibit my triceps, because my triceps do the opposite action of my biceps. So if I want to really contract my biceps, I will inhibit the action of my triceps to allow the biceps to fire as strong as it can. Or another one here that says the patellar reflex, okay, stretch muscle, so you stretch out your quadriceps, and what that does, it causes the quadriceps to contract, and it causes the hamstrings, the antagonist, to relax. So the way this is going to work, one, when the muscle spindles are activated by stretch, the associated sensory neurons are going to transmit afferent impulses to a high frequency to the cord. Okay? They send the information into the cord. Two, sensory neurons synapse directly via alpha motor neurons. All right? These are going to synapse in the cord. That's what you want to know. Then two things are going to happen. One, you get alpha motor neurons telling the muscle to contract that was stretched out, and you're going to be having another alpha motor neuron telling the antagonist muscle, the muscle that was not stretched, hey, relax, so this guy can completely contract and protect the joint. Okay, knee-jerk reflex or your patellar tendon reflex, gist of what's happening here. Where's my mouse? You tap the patellar tendon, it stretches out the quadriceps. So we send information into the spinal cord. Next, what's going to happen is it goes to an interneuron, it passes through the spinal cord, tells us, boom, stretch out or contract the quadriceps. Next, we hit our interneuron, go to our alpha motor neuron, go to the hamstrings, our antagonist say, relax, let the quadriceps contract, and do their job. Next one with Golgi tendon reflexes. These guys are going to be there to prevent excessive stretch by relaxing a muscle, all right? So if you have contraction or passive stretch against a Golgi tendon organ, what will happen is the muscle will contract or it'll relax in order to protect the area. So the afferent impulses, so you'll contract or you'll passively stretch. That'll activate our Golgi tendon. We send impulses, we send sensory afferent impulses to the spinal cord. The contracting muscles will then relax, and the antagonists are going to contract. So that's going to be kind of opposite of what we were saying before. Contracting muscles relax, and the agonists contract. Okay, next ones, we have something called flexor and cross extensor reflexes. With flexor withdrawal, it's basically if you touch a hot stove, you quickly pull your hand away. Why? To prevent damage. Okay, this is going to cause automatic withdrawal of the threatened body part. It's going to be ipsilateral and polysynaptic. So I touch the hot stove, I pull my hand away. With cross extensor reflex, this is going to occur in weight-bearing limbs. Basically, if you fall backwards, if one leg goes forward, the other leg will go backwards. And what's happening is you're having an opposite effect, so you can help maintain balance. So here, you're going to have your quadriceps strongly contract. Golgi tendon organ will activate. Afferent impulses come in. They synapse at our motor neurons. With this one, we're going to tell our quadriceps to stop contracting. With this one, we tell our hamstrings to contract, so we protect the muscle and protect the joint. Either cross extensor reflex, okay, basically what happens is you have some sort of stimulus, you stretch out the arm. Alright, when you stretch out the arm, what's going to happen? We're going to be sending sensory impulses in. those sensory impulses are going to come out, and they're going to tell the triceps to relax and the biceps to flex. So it's going to flex back, all right? And if you get a reciprocal site, the opposite's going to happen. And finally, we'll have our superficial reflexes. So these will be elicited by gentle cutaneous stimulation. These are going to depend on upper motor neuron pathways. The most common one is your plantar reflex. The gist of it is you make a C-shaped reflex on the bottom of a foot. We'll do this in lab, and what happens is you go lateral aspect of the sole of foot, and then you're going to go downwards. Okay, so you go medial to lateral and downwards. What's supposed to happen is your toes are supposed to curl in. It's supposed to stimulate you dragging your foot backwards on the ground, and what's supposed to happen is your toes curl in to grip the ground. That's the way it works in a normal healthy adult. If you have some sort of upper motor neuron lesion, or it's a baby that's not ready to walk, what happens is the toes flare. When the toes flare, that means that they're not clawing down to grab on the ground like they're supposed to be. So that could either happen, like I said, in a baby, or it can happen in somebody with some sort of brain damage. That's it.